Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Mary Kay Gallagher. I'm Superintendent of Northville Public Schools, and I'm joined by Erin Boffman, our Assistant Superintendent for Instructional Services, and Mr. Mike Zoff, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. We are also joined by Board of Education Treasurer Jim Mazurik tonight. So the format of our presentation this evening is to first cover some information about our ESSER III funding and our equalization funding for Northville schools. This is federal funding. So we'll review that information. Mr. Zoff will review the amount of the allocation and a little bit of history about ESSER funding. And then following Mike's portion of the presentation, Erin Boffman will present the questions that are asked in terms of consideration for use of this funding. We'll cover some of examples of how the funding can be used. And then we'll open it up for any questions, comments that you may have, and then certainly any ideas. With this, we've also launched a stakeholder survey, so that is an opportunity for you to weigh in individually on any of your comments or thoughts or priorities for use of this funding. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Zoff.
Thank you, Mary Kay. So if we go to the very first slide, so this particular slide, what it does show is the COVID relief funding that we've received, really going back to the initial CARES Act that was passed back in March of 2020. So the first two bars, it says Coronavirus Relief Fund and ESSER I. Those were the initial rounds of federal funding that we received. And you can see for Coronavirus Relief Funding, we received $2.7 million, and for ESSER I, we've received $97,000. One thing I just want to point out that the ESSER money itself, as will be the case with all the ESSER money received, the ESSER I, II, and III, that money is all dependent upon our Title I student population. So you can see generally within Northville, our community, we don't have a large population of Title I eligible on a percentage basis. So those numbers aren't quite as large as you might have heard some other districts receive. But in any event, the first two bars, the CRF and the ESSER I, we have basically spent most of those monies in last year, in the 2020-21 school year. The middle two bars, which it says ESSER II and stabilization, those two sources of funds we have allocated to us, the $475,000 and the $2,186,000. Those monies were really a result of the coronavirus supplement funding that was approved by the federal government back at the end of the calendar year, December 27th last year. A little bit more money on ESSER, and then also the big money, though, which we really have kind of targeted for this year to use, the $2,186,000, is really actually state funding. That's a supplement that the state appropriated to school districts who did not get, I believe it was $475 per pupil on ESSER funding. So we did not receive that. So we got instead a pretty good stabilization allocation. And that's what we'll use for, like I said, for this year. And then finally, really the point of, I think, today's discussion is really the last two bottom bars, ESSER III and the ESSER III stabilization. You can see where Mary Kay just drew those circles, especially the stabilization. That is section 11T of the state bill, and that will give us $6.9 million to spend over the next 2 years, up through 2024, actually. So all of that, all those monies really are represent all the federal sources that we have received supplemental funds for. And if we go to the next slide, what I just wanted to kind of share with the community is, the first installment of our federal money, the $2.7 million of coronavirus relief funding. Where did that money go? How was it spent? And you can see kind of what I've wanted to show here in large buckets. Staff salaries and benefits. Because of the delivery model we provided last year with in-person, hybrid, virtual instruction, we were able to claim some of the staffing that our staffing costs, and we used some of the monies for that purpose. Virtual instruction software and online tuition. Everybody probably knows we have new software, Schoology. We had other instructional software that we procured to supplement our instructional program. And then we had added online courses over and above a kind of a typical year. Then PPE and safety supplies, about $342,000. Cleaning and disinfecting, $723,000. Again, that was really to meet the, some folks might remember the return to school roadmap from Governor Whitmer back last year. So all of those requirements for cleaning had to be embedded into our districts and our buildings. Technology, Chromebooks and iPads, about almost $600,000. Indoor air quality, we did upgrade our air filters, and we did some cleaning of our air handling units to the tune of about $62,000, and then some summer programming of about $15,000. So that's how we spent that initial allocation of CRF funds, $2.7 million. Again, now really what we want to focus on tonight is really these latest two sources of federal monies that was really produced or generated from the American Rescue Plan Act that was signed back on March of 2021. And it was providing about $122 billion nationwide into the ESSER money. And this is called ESSER III. This is our third round of federal funding. Our allocation right now of ESSER III is $1,068,563. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that allocation is really based on our student Title I eligible population. So again, it's more than what we had received in ESSER II and certainly ESSER I, but again, not quite as large as many districts that you might have read about in the paper or so on. That application is actually due for ESSER III December 15th. We have to have an application in by that date in order to get ESSER III funds. So that's the first source of federal funding. The second source is kind of the same source, but basically what it is the Department of Education did approve the Michigan Department of Education's plan to use some of its discretionary ARP funding to provide a very similar equalization payment that similar to the second round of ESSER II, where districts did not receive a certain amount of funding. In the case of ESSER III, districts who receive less than $1,093 per pupil were eligible to receive what is called Section 11T equalization. So in our case, with our allocation, we did not get anywhere near $1,093. So we got a Section 11T equalization funding of about $6.9 million. And I just do want to mention that right now that is still an estimate. We've seen some estimates from the House Fiscal Agency and the Michigan Department of Education, but it's actually not final yet, but it should be in that order of $6.9 million. It does require a separate Section 11T application. in addition to the application that we have to make for ESSER III money. And then also the Section 11T equalization funds, they must meet the same requirements of the ARP ESSER III allocation that we received. So we'll talk more about what those requirements are, but they are open, and we do have to meet those requirements for 11T. The other thing to note is Section 11T equalization funds can be used only to impact identified subgroups of disadvantaged students under some federal law. That's what that Section 2001F of ARP is. And basically, it's activities to address the unique needs of low-income children and students, English learners, racial ethnic minorities, homeless students, and foster care. So there are some as you can see right already, there are some restrictions that are really attached to ESSER III that just weren't in play for ESSER I and ESSER II. So that's kind of the second other funding source. And then finally, the other restriction that I do want to mention, for ESSER III and Section 11T, up at the top, it says the amounts allocated. For ESSER III, the $1,068,563, and for Section 11T, the equalization, it's $6.9 million. For ESSER III, the federal government has said that we have to allocate 20% of our ESSER III funds to remedy learning loss. That's a directive that's right in the legislation. So basically about $213,000 of the $1,068,000 we have to allocate in that area for learning loss recovery. The other $854,000 is there are some set permissible uses of those monies that Mr. Boffman will talk about here shortly. With Section 11T, the $6.9 million, the state has indicated that of those monies, we have to allocate 51.4% of those monies for learning loss recovery. Another 10.3% we have to allocate toward evidence-based summer enrichment, and then another 10.3% toward comprehensive after-school programming. So in total, those restricted uses of Section 11T money come to almost $5 million of that $6.9 million, leaving us a little more than $1.9 million of funding that, again, has to be used for other permissible uses that you'll see here shortly. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Boffman, and he'll talk about some of those permissible uses.
Thank you, Mr. Zoff. I want to talk to you just a little bit about what has been allowable. And really, these things haven't changed since the original money began that Mike was sharing earlier. These uses have been kind of standards that have been expected to be upheld with any of this money being spent. There are some questions that they ask that you really think about as you think about spending this funding. Those questions are on the screen. Will it prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus? So is the money being used to help aid in what is being caused by coronavirus effect on schools? Is it allowable under the CARES Act? We'll talk about those allowable expenses in just a few moments. There are 15 areas that are allowable. Is it reasonable and necessary? Does it make sense for the district to be spending the money in this way? Does it promote equity so that students who are unduly burdened by this pandemic are receiving additional support and help to make things equitable? And does it support a return to students in the classroom? Is it helping making sure schools can have in-person learning? There are some examples of this kind of thing that have been put onto the survey that you'll see if you have not opened yet, that include things like after school and summer programming, like Mr. Zoff was just talking about, engaging families, whether that's connecting through family resources and family games and nights to work with families on different activities, or providing them resources at home to help their children, providing social emotional learning support, counseling, mental health supports, wellness, physical and mental, Technology, which covers a whole gamut of things, as Mr. Zoff was saying, we've already spent some money in that area, but other ways in which to improve connectivity, infrastructure, hardware. It can be spent on facilities and things such as continuing to monitor and enhance air quality, purchasing supplies that allow us to continue to sanitize facilities, providing wipes and masks and hand sanitizer and other things that are necessary to make sure the facilities are clean and safe. Enhancing instructional material access, which is a broad topic, but certainly allows us to potentially add new materials to our students' accessibility. And then increase interventions for students who may be struggling, whether the result of a pandemic or not, but students who are currently struggling. Continue just to train our staff on how to handle infectious diseases, including coronavirus. Improving our emergency preparedness and response efforts for current and future issues that may arise. Early learning, preschool programming. Early learning can be elementary. It doesn't only mean preschool programming as well. And then there are these idea about outdoor learning spaces, which you'll see in the allowable uses as we go along. So other ESSER requirements that are in place, some of these are a little bit of a repeat. Just want to make sure we really emphasize these. The most important part about this is to make sure that all of these things are helping to return safely to in-person instruction. There's a requirement that a continuity of learning plan be in place. The good news for Northville Public Schools is that we have a full return to in-person learning. So this continuity of learning plan is already in place and has been posted on the district website. We've met that requirement already, but we'll continue to enhance and sharpen our focus on those things. We have to reserve at least 20% of funds to address learning loss. And again, that's a broad topic. Lots of ways to do that with kids. Lots of ways we do that now that could potentially be enhanced or a number of students added to. We'll talk more about this maintenance of equity piece, but there's some clarifications being done with the U.S. Department of Education on what that means, with the idea of maintaining these services after this funding has moved on for certain students in our high poverty areas. And then really one of the reasons what we're here tonight, one of the most important parts of this whole idea is that there be meaningful and documented consultation with stakeholders to make sure that the community that these funds are intended for have a say in what it is that they're being used to accomplish. And then we certainly will have to sign off on an assurance that that's occurred when we write the plan that Mr. Zoff was sharing is due on December 15th. Meaningful consultation is defined here on the screen. In many places, you'll find the meaningful consultation was just a survey, but we really felt like we wanted to have an opportunity to speak live with some of our families, parents, stakeholders, teachers, really to get a chance to hear from them, address any questions, and talk through some of those things. So that's why tonight we'll be here again on Thursday at 11 a.m. But ideally, we are expected to have that consultation with all of our stakeholders, which are defined here: principals, teachers, school leaders, educators, parents, students, special education administrators, community organizations, and then there are some other specifics if they exist within your area, including tribal leaders, civil rights organizations, and stakeholders who represent children with disabilities, English language learners, homelessness, foster care, migratory, and children who may be incarcerated or underserved. With that in mind, we invited, of course, all of our community stakeholders this evening in multiple times. We also will send the survey out multiple times to make sure that people get a chance to share that feedback in writing. If they're not able to attend one of these sessions, we'll also record these sessions, make them available publicly so that people can review them in response to filling out their survey. Well, let's talk quickly about the 15 areas. And again, these areas are not just for ESSER III. These have been the allowable uses for ESSER funding throughout. So anything that's authorized under ESEA, which allows us to look at career and tech, IDEA, McKinney-Vento, Homeless Assistance Act, anything to help us coordinate response for emergencies, local health emergencies or otherwise. Anything to provide our building principals with the resources they need to address their schools. That's a very broad topic, so think about that category and all the things that go into keeping a school running. Addressing the unique needs of highly vulnerable populations. This is going back to some of those students, maybe homeless, foster care, underserved, incarcerated youth, and others who may be under vulnerable status. Developing and implementing procedures and systems to improve preparedness. Again, going back to that emergency response piece that we talked about in some of the examples. Staff training and professional development on infectious diseases, which you saw in that list of kind of activities that'll be on the survey. Again, purchasing those supplies, masks, hand sanitizers, sanitizing products, hand wipes, and other things that are available to our and staff. Planning for long-term closures for meals and other things. And again, going back to the fact that these are original uses for when the pandemic was early on. So some of these might sound a little bit like, well, that doesn't make so much sense now, but these are allowable uses that haven't changed. So when we were with families who didn't have access to food, when they didn't have access to lunch every day, there were those as well. Then the technology piece, for example, when we were loaning out devices during the pandemic, and other educational services to make sure we provide continuity. How do we continue the learning in the midst of a crisis? It also can be used for educational technology, again, going back to hardware, software, devices, Chromebooks, the Schoology pieces, and other digital tools that are used by our teachers to provide that virtual learning environment and in the classroom. Providing mental health supports and services. We talked about that being that social emotional learning, whether it's mental or physical health, providing that wellness opportunity for kids. Planning and implementing activities related to summer learning or after school. It's very specific about after school. It cannot be before school. I know that sounds crazy, but it is a real reality. So it's after school and summer related programming. Other activities necessary to maintain the operation of the district. Again, a very broad category that just talks about what do you need to make sure that the school district can keep going? How do we make sure that they keep running? Addressing learning loss. Now, this section 13 is important. This is where that 20% has to be spent on addressing one of these 4 bullets or combination of these 4 bullets. So using high quality assessments to make sure we're measuring our students' progress, such as NWEA, implementing evidence-based activities, so things that have been proven to show support and results for kids, providing information for supporting their learning, so things we can do at home to help parents keep their kids moving forward, and tracking student attendance and improving engagement. And again, going back to when students were out of school, and even now, students who may have disengaged during the process or having trouble re-entering school can be used to help to provide activities and supports for them. 14 is school facilities and improvements. Kind of goes back to that air quality, potentially air handling. You'll see that in section 15 as well. But anything that would help to make sure we minimize the amount of environmental health hazards and support students' health physically. And then lastly, that 15 is that maintenance, repair, replacement, upgrade of air handling systems, which we've done a lot of already, as Mr. Zoff shared, filtering, purification, other things to make sure that the air quality that the students are breathing, staff are safe and of the highest quality. Just so you know, the report is due December 15th. The good news is, however, the money is available to us to spend over a period of several years. So according to what's called the Tidings Amendment and some of the legislation language, we have until 2024 to obligate or spend these funds. So it's not something that has to be done in a short period of time, but a plan must be in place for how that will be spent over that series of years. So when you think about summer programming, it could be multiple years of summer programming or multiple years of after school support. So we do have, and you can see Mr. Zoff has laid out here, all those different sources of funding and when they're expected to be spent. And we're keeping tight control on that to make sure that we are utilizing every bit of that funding to make sure it is spent and not sent back. So final notes on this is that something called supplanting is sometimes not allowed with grant funding, which means you can't pay for things that the district's already expected to be paying for with grants. It's supposed to be above and beyond. The good news with ESSER funding is that supplanting is allowed. So you are able to use it to pay for expenses that might normally be a district obligation. The exception that it cannot be used to fund regular salaries and wages. So your normal course of event, teacher salaries and wages cannot be, or administrative or cafeteria or buses, they cannot pay for regular salaries and wages. They might be used in other creative ways, but not for those base level. But we can use it to supplant in other areas where we help to provide support to the general fund to keep the district soluble for longer and on good financial standing. And secondly, we will have a narrative that will need to be completed as part of this application, which asks these questions just on the screen. How will the funds be used to prevent or mitigate in-person learning to make sure that we're providing a safe space? How will they be used to address the academic impact of lost instructional time? How will the remaining funds be used? So it's really just they call it a plan of use or a spending plan. And how will the district ensure that the interventions will respond to the academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs of all students, particularly those disproportionately impacted by COVID-19? So really, they want to make sure that you get stakeholders involved, that you make sure they fit these allowable uses, and that they are addressed in the plan of use as describing how it's going to be used, what it's going to be used for, and how, like, is it going to be, how much this year, next year, the following year, to make sure that the funding is being used in the best possible way. So that's a general idea. I'll open it back up to either Mr. Zoff or Ms. Gallagher if they want to add any more pieces onto that. I know we went through that quickly.
Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add or clarify?
No, I think we're set. I think Aaron covered it.
Okay. I did make a note in chat, but we're also joined tonight, in addition to Jim Mazurek from our Board of Ed. We also have our Board of Ed President, Sarah Prescott. We also have some other members of our central office team, Rebecca Peck and Beth Santer have joined us as well. So at this point, we will open it up to questions and any comments you may have. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute your mic and just go ahead and ask it. You're also welcome to put it in chat if you prefer to put a question there. And I guess Ms. Prescott or Mr. Mazurek, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
No, Mary Kay, at least, I have some ideas, but I'd like to listen to the community first. I think that's the most important thing is, see any ideas or thoughts the community has, and then we can chime in afterwards.
Okay. And Mr. Baughman did put the stakeholder survey link in chat, and it also went out on the Q communication and the listserv as well. So any comments or questions from folks in attendance?
I had a question. My name is Chris Musner, and I have twin daughters in 4th grade at Winchester and a 6th grader at Meads Mill. Is the district going to be sharing some data to let us know what our areas of needs are? So for example, are we going to be seeing, where there's deficit areas, for example, in math or reading, or particular failure rates at the high school level, such as algebra, geometry, so that we could look at some of that, using that money for intervention areas, and we would know what those areas are?
Well, I would say I have a response, and then certainly Mr. Baughman may have some information to add. We do have the reports that are on our website already in terms of our mid-year report and end of the year report from last year. But if you have specific data, certainly you could submit those questions and we will respond to inquiries. We're also certainly meeting with our principals, have met with school improvement teams. We're opening this up for our staff input. So we absolutely will be giving thought to where we see identified areas of need. Again, and then we have to look within the grant parameters as well. Aaron, do you have anything you'd like to add to my general comment?
I would echo the same thing. So those results have been put together. I'm going to look to see if I can grab a link off the district website. It is posted there as part of our COVID planning. We can pull that in. You can take a look at both our NWEA, our MSTEP, and other test results that we've identified, PSAT and SAT. So you can take a look and see where we've identified some deficit areas. There is a narrative as well in that report from the mid-year and the end of the year. You can take a look at what those areas are. It's spelled out there for you. And happy, again, as Mary Kay said, anything you're specifically curious about, if you want to dig into any of that, we're happy to answer those questions that you have. So I'm going to see if I can grab that link. I'll put it in the chat if I can grab it quickly for you.
And Karen Meyer posted in chat, could we clarify whether the learning loss funds going forward can address all students, or is it specific to the student populations described?
So what we know is that the $1,093,000 is open more like the other ESSER funding has been. So we have less restrictions on that funding. We are working with the state and the U.S. Department of Education on that $6.9 million to identify if it is exclusive to those subgroups, or if those subgroups must be captured within the work that we're doing. I think there's still some definition needed there between the state and the federal government. And so we're going to take in all the meaningful conversations we can right now, knowing we have at least $1,093,000 that will continue to be utilized in the same way we've utilized in the past, where it's more general to all students. And that $6.9 million will certainly be addressing those areas of kids, but hoping that we could get a better definition of exactly who it applies to.
Given that level of funding, the $7 million, our hope is to identify areas that absolutely benefit our most at-risk kids while also serving our larger population. And probably the best example I can give of that is, a curb cut on the sidewalk is there to accommodate the needs of individuals with disabilities in a wheelchair or whatever, but it helps folks traveling with strollers. It helps a wide variety of people. So that is our hope, that they wouldn't put so many parameters on that funding that it limits it too much. So let's see. If a student needs to stay home due to coronavirus, are they provided a laptop to attend virtually or complete assignments while out of the classroom?
So right now, our teachers work with our families individually based on the needs at the family's home, whether it's live recording, a live Zoom or recording or a combination of things. Each family has been working individually with their teachers because everyone's needs at home are different, whether mom or dad can be there, or whether maybe a caretaker for the child while they're quarantined. At the high school, we have had more of a dependence on those devices, even when they're in person, with a lot of the work being done at Schoology. So there have been some devices loaned out. We have not necessarily been loaning those out at the elementary and middle school level because most students have not necessarily needed them with in-person instruction. If you have a hardship, if you contact my office directly, we can talk about that. But typically we're not just hitting them, because typically our kids now, especially with vaccinations and some of their quarantine rules changes with testing, a lot of our students are able to stay. If they're put out for a period of time, it's typically no more than 7 days if they're able to test, unless they're actually positive still, in which case they're not able to return yet. But we can certainly work with families. So just reach out to us if there's a concern. If you need something, we certainly will help, but it's not necessarily a general like we did during the shutdown.
Thank you for your comment, Heather, about being able to reach out and get a Chromebook. So appreciate that positive comment. Any other questions, wonderings, or ideas, thoughts?
Yes. Hi, I'm Katie Becker. I have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. I'm very excited to be here. I have 3 kids in Northville Schools, 1 at Hillside and 2 at Ridgewood. I'm also a former Northville Schools teacher. I taught last year, 1st grade at Silver Springs. When you guys talked about equity, I looked back at my Instagram, and as a teacher, I get teacher Instagram posts a lot. So one thing that I marked the other day was, I don't know who needs to hear this, but literacy should be a top priority in a district's equity plan. And I'm about to die on my hill here because literacy has always been top priority. My own daughter is dyslexic, and we have struggled with getting her the help she needs. And when I found out that she was struggling, I realized as a teacher, I did not know how to teach her to read. We were never taught that in college, actually how to teach kids to read. And I think if I polled most of the teachers I know, they would agree. But once I realized this, I took a deep dive into what I could do to help her. And I came across structured literacy. And I specifically got trained in Orton Gillingham. My daughter was using a program called Phonics First. And when you talk about learning loss, last year in my 1st grade classroom, I had 17 students, and I saw the impact of what half of a year in kindergarten spent virtually, what that did to them. And the majority of my kids at the beginning of the year were behind, as expected. And I use FNP, but I'll be honest, it's not my favorite because it doesn't really address learning issues with structured literacy. And that's my big issue with it. And so I pulled in phonics first, just, 10 to 15 minutes a day with my kids. And the gaps that were closed last year in my first grade classroom were significant. I know that Northville paid for some of our LCs and resource room teachers to get trained this summer in Orton Gillingham. And in talking to friends and former coworkers, they use words like life-changing. And I never knew that this was how I was supposed to be helping my kids. So I am quite literally begging the district to consider this for K2 teachers. If it's not available for K2, then we need more paras trained. We need Title I trained. We need as many people as we can get trained in it, because it's coming. We have a dyslexia bill on the table for the state of Michigan. Northville could get ahead of this. We could be leaders in this area. And I truly believe in it. So if any of you have ever read the article Hard Words by Emily Hanford, it's very impactful. She's an educational reporter, and I definitely recommend, including the Board of Education members that are with us tonight, to read that. I've sent it to Angela and Lisa McIntyre personally, but that's what I would recommend for the district.
Thank you, Katie. I am backing up. Kim, let's see, there's a comment asking what ongoing services are there for high school lost learning and struggling learners after the school learning lab last year. She's referring to the learning lab that was offered at lunchtime for help. And we also had after school programming. Which is, the question is, what are ongoing services?
Well, certainly we have several, again, not necessarily saying that they're enough. I'm saying these are the things that are ongoing. We have mass support services we offer through our at-risk funding, and we also are providing continued learning consultant services for students who need outside of special ed services. We are currently running an after-school learning lab for our students 4 days a week that we're able to get some grant funding to help provide outside of the funding we're even talking about here today. But those are the kinds of conversations we'll be having about this funding, as well as about how do we add to those ongoing services, because in some cases they are enough, in other cases they're not. We don't currently have a lunch because we went back to a traditional block schedule. That lunch time that we had for that is not there this year the way that it was last year. So right now the after school program is that additional time. And those students who have identified tier 2 or tier 3 needs are likely receiving either that additional math support during a math support class, or with our learning consultant typically for reading support. But certainly room there, I think, for, as you think about filling out that survey, some things that may be additionally helpful.
We also have a question, are there currently restorative practices facilitators or general education social workers in all schools?
The answer is yeah, we have a social worker in every building, a couple at the high school. We were able to utilize some mental health funding, grant funding that we received a couple of years ago from the state to increase the number of social workers in every building, and they actually added a mental health counselor at the high school as well. We do have a lot of our folks trained in restorative practices. We actually have more going this year, continuing to grow that cadre. I don't know if I have any facilitators themselves. I know I have some folks trained in it, but something, again, that you may want to include in the survey as you fill it out, if it's something you feel like would be beneficial, to add facilitators so that we have someone ourselves who's training, certainly familiar, and have lots of staff who are familiar in utilizing restorative practices. And again, social workers in every across the K-12 spectrum and our preschool program.
Beth, Sandra, did you have anything you wanted to add either to this comment or to the Orton Gillingham training? I might be putting you on the spot.
Oh, no,
Oh,
you're
there you
fine. Yeah, thank you very much. I was just trying to find mute in my video button. So I heard Katie refer to the fact that we've sent our elementary resource and some LC. We've also sent some secondary people to Orton Gillingham training. And Katie is also correct that Orton Gillingham is not meant to be everything and anything for any reading reading instruction. It's meant to be more tools for the toolbox. And we make sure that in Northville that we use as many methodologies as we can so that we can meet students' needs as best as we can. And I know that there was also a question either asked or in the chat about speech pathologists. And we have 7 speech pathologists that are in K-12. And in terms of how many per school, the way that speech pathologists are assigned are by our mandated caseload numbers that we need to comply with, but also by building need and staff preference. And then we also have 3 additional speech therapists that are at Cook School.
So appreciate the ideas too, because that whole literacy support and how do we most specifically support phonics development, word study, that piece of it we know is an important piece of that toolbox and something that, you know, no one reading program addresses all of it to the nth degree. So it is making sure that we have enough in the toolbox to respond appropriately to the needs of the students across tier 1 in our classrooms, in addition to our supports. So appreciate those suggestions. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. I am a parent of a first grader at Moraine, and also an educator in other districts, surrounding districts. And I'm wondering if there's consideration around boosting instructional coaching at Northville in areas. I particularly have a bent toward technology and blended learning, but also math instruction, literacy instruction, assistive technology, EL. You know, you can have training. You can have trainings and professional developments that are one-off, but research really shows that job-embedded professional development and the presence of instructional coaches is really effective and more effective in terms of long-term. And I think that's going to bring in, you know, like I said, those research-based best practices across the board for all of our students, as well as those in particular that have been affected by this pandemic.
So I'm excited to share that that's absolutely a priority for us. We currently have a math and a reading coach by the district. One is a third-party provider who's been working with us for years, who's actually done some work in Novi nearby. As well, we hired our own internal reading coach, and this past year, the board in January brought on a full-time instructional and technology integration coach, who's a former Hillside teacher, whose job is to continue to provide and has done a wonderful job and continues. And as you can imagine, there's a lot more teachers than there are coaches. And so we do continue to work with Risa and others to try to enhance that work. One of our biggest struggles, and certainly not an excuse, is that, you know, coaching requires sometimes for us to have subs, and that's been a bit of a challenge back and forth. But some of our coaches have started this year really pushing into the classroom in small groups, because it is harder to have teachers out of the classroom to get that additional support. But we do have those coaches happening. We actually have that coaching happening in our early childhood program, where they have employed a full-time coach as well. We are looking for ways to add more of that into the secondary, because most of that coaching right now with regards to reading and math is happening at the elementary level, where we do believe it's obviously most important to get to those kids first, because earlier on we do that, the more likely are they not having problems in middle high school. But we do recognize the need for some more of that additional support at the middle, and we are starting to push some of that math reading into the middle school right now with those coaches. But certainly, like I said before, you know, it's never really enough. There's always more that we could be doing with some of those things.
Thank you.
The next question is, do we have anyone who could help with dyslexia for non-special ed students at the high school?
We do have our learning consultants who work with our non-special ed students at the high school. We have a couple of teachers whose full-time role is to do some of that work in learning consultant, and they are receiving some of that training and been working with some of our staff. We have some additional staff at the secondary level going to receive some of that work in Gillingham and training that was referred to by a previous parent. So we continue to grow those skills. They're again, 2 people in a high school of 2,500 kids. So we try to utilize them in the most efficient way we can. If we have specific concerns, I would reach out to the child's counselor first to see if make sure that they're on the radar, that they're being looked at as part of our MTSS process, and make sure that that's known, a known issue. And then if you have any concerns or you don't feel like you're getting the information that you need, please feel free to contact my office as well. We can get you the right person.
Hi, my name is Chip Amo. I've got 2 sons in Winchester Elementary, and I'm going to switch off of the learning and go to physical environment for just a minute. I saw a lot of spending from previous on the disinfecting and also, some air quality issues, and that's sort of my world in my professional life. One of the things I just would like to emphasize, as we look at cleaning and disinfecting, and I know with some of the renovations that we've had recently where we're swapping out and making more cleanable surfaces, putting in more hard surfaces and that kind of thing, to really make sure that whatever we're doing from a cleaning and disinfecting and putting products into the school environment, that we're paying special attention to making sure that the chemicals that we're putting into the buildings are not any more harmful than the virus that we're trying to alleviate. So really looking at the types of cleaning products that we're using and the types of materials that we're using, so that we're not putting in volatile organic compounds into the school. I don't know what sort of standards we have in terms of our building, the types of materials that we're using, but really to look at ones that are free of chemicals of concern, so that from an air quality standpoint, we're making sure that we're maximizing that and we're not exposing our staff to harmful chemicals that, while maybe good for killing coronavirus, may not necessarily be good for breathing in, and especially in these closed environments where you've got a lot of, kids there. The other thing I would just mention is, if we're going to be doing some investing in infrastructure, is to really look at opportunities to continue to improve on the air quality. And when we do that, when we're putting in new HVAC or anything like that within the buildings, that we're doing that with an eye towards being as energy efficient as possible, because those long-term savings, if we can capitalize and use some of these dollars right now to make better upgrades to energy efficiency, that's going to help our long-term bottom line in terms of our operating costs of our facilities moving forward as well. So really making sure that we're, I saw some being able to offset some of the cost things that we might spend on otherwise. But if we're renovating a new facility, that might be a good opportunity to, upgrade and maybe put something in that's a little bit more efficient and better for air quality than we might initially consider.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, input?
I did add to the chat a link. I don't know if it hyperlinked. You may have to copy and paste it. It looks like it didn't hyperlink for some reason. That'll take you to that end of the year report that has all that academic data and other data that was provided for those who were asking about earlier in the call. That will give you the most comprehensive set of data from last school year with regards to how our students did coming into the school year, all the way till our last testing in the spring prior to school releasing. So I think that'll give you a good sense of kind of where our concerns or areas are at and what grade levels and what specific subjects we're looking at.
Just want to add my thanks to everyone, and people can connect with the Board of Education through NPS, BOE, an email, and also of course at board meetings. This is the first of 2 opportunities like this specifically for this purpose, but the board takes comment every single meeting. And of course, in between with email.
Thanks, Sarah.
I would add to Ms. Prescott's comment that we plan to take the feedback you provide to us both live and in that survey, begin working on a plan based on the feedback from stakeholders. We'll be sharing that with the Board of Education and some conversations with them at the 30th committee of the whole meeting we'll have some dialogue back and forth, share with them some of that information, and then we'll move forward from that point with that dialogue to begin to finalize a plan that will ultimately be submitted. There was a question specifically, and I'll share this with the high school administrative team about the masks being kept up. Is there a way to help remind kids that they got to be covering the nose and mouth? I'll certainly share that with Mr. Koski and his team to make sure that they know it's a concern. Potentially, I think the question was, is there potentially some signage or other things that can be done to help remind them that they got to keep the mask on their nose and mouth and to keep everyone safe? Oh, they're saying the link doesn't work. Let me see if I can fix that.
Oh, I was able to when I copied it, I was able to get to the report, Aaron. So you can't click on it. You do have to copy and paste it.
Hyperlink, but I'm going to see if I can find a better link here. If we have just another minute while others think about any other questions they have.
Mike, would you mind reviewing the information about where the MSDS sheets are and how we keep track of chemicals or what's in our schools? That Mr. Amo's point for future planning is well taken, and certainly with money that's one-time money, doing anything we can do to improve facilities and expend those upfront costs to save future costs are all terrific points. We do also have information available on our website, though, for our MSDS sheets and how you can submit information.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Kay. I was going to mention something. Two things with regards to the cleaning chemicals. First of all, we use a product. It's called Betco Fight Back. It has an HMIS rating of 000. So it's probably the safest product that we could find actually to do our cleaning and disinfecting. So just wanted to point that out. And regarding where you can locate our MSDS sheets, if you go to our website, you go to Finance and Operations up at the top, the department, then click on Operations. It'll bring up an online product called MSDS Online. So that's where you can access any of our MSDS sheets as well. The other thing with regard to the facilities, I just wanted to mention that actually earlier this year, this calendar year, we had Peter Basso and Associates, who is our mechanical and electrical engineering consultant. They came in and kind of did a study of, where we are, the current state with regards to our facilities. And we were trying to make sure that as we entered the school year, that all of our spaces, our classrooms where students are present, had at least 5 air changes per hour. What we were able to find is that there was really probably a handful, like maybe 4 or 5 different areas that did not actually achieve a 5 air change per hour target. So overall, I think we're doing pretty good in that regard. I do know that when we built Winchester and when we built Silver Springs, the codes were certainly a lot different then. When we built those buildings, certainly we met the code that was in play at the time. The code has certainly tightened as the years have gone on. So, as we look to the future, I mean, these buildings and the air handling systems that are in some of these buildings, right now our priority has been to make sure that they're operating at the optimal level that they've been designed to achieve. So that's really all we can really do at this point. But Mr. Amo makes certainly a good point that these buildings are aging, and that is going to be something we're going to need to kind of look at. We have a few buildings around that same vintage that we may need to take a look at those air handling units. These are, some very significant investment dollars, but we're probably getting near that time where we need to reevaluate those. So I appreciate the comment and the input.
Like there was
There
a
was,
follow-up-
oh, go ahead, Aaron, I'm
just there was
sorry.
a follow-up question regards to students with Lysol, Clorox wipes. What about teachers' classes having kids use Clorox, Lysol wipes? Seems inappropriate if you have safer cleaning agents. I don't know if there was any conversation about the use of those products.
The Clorox wipes.
Yeah, the student and teacher use of those wipes in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, we should, anybody who uses the wipe should have, gloves on. Make sure that, they do have that on. I'm not sure. I think
That's an excellent point, though. I mean, is that, teachers send out the requests all the time to say, bring in Clorox wipes or bring in whatever, and they ask parents to bring those in. I think we, as a district, should have a standard for what the wipes should be, and based on, more of a, something that passes whatever the standards are for the system, and have those available for the teachers to use, and not to bring in, because if we continue to allow outside products to come in at whoever brings them in, you're going to be exposing kids to, things that they don't need to, and teachers to things that they don't need to. And I think if we could set aside some of that money to say, these are the wipes that you're going to use, and make sure that they're readily available, so that so that the teachers don't have to keep asking parents to bring in outside things that may not comport with the standards of what we have for chemicals, I think that would be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. I think pre-pandemic, that was probably the practice. I think, families brought in, Lysol wipes, a few containers. But at this point, even beginning last year, really, we provided, and maybe I should just kind of mention our process. So we have an inventory sheet of all PPE that is in use in all of our buildings and classrooms. And so every week, we ask the buildings to send us basically kind of an order form, if you will, and it does include wipes, as well as a number of other PPE, masks, gloves, and so on. So I totally agree. It's really incumbent on the district that we actually have been providing those to the classrooms. So there really should not be any reason at this point for parents to be bringing in Lysol wipes or anything like that, because there is an established protocol where buildings, they just need to order what they need on a weekly basis, and we make a delivery out of our operations department to the buildings and fulfill those orders. So if that's happening, there's really no reason it should be happening.
Mike, do you know if we had this order form process before COVID? Because I've had kids in elementary for a number of years, and the Clorox wipes have been on the list before COVID. So
No,
I just wonder if it's like a holdover from where we had.
No. Actually, it was a protocol that was put in place in response to the return to school roadmap. So yeah, it's fairly new, just last year.
Yeah. So what it would have been is, I mean, one thing that we could like unwind back to root causes is 5 years ago, when my kiddo would have been in second grade or in kindergarten, even earlier, there was Clorox wipes along with tissues and, markers and whatever. And so it may be that that's sort of a legacy entry in the generic supply list that we can just sort of like, learn from. I mean, I share, the comments of concerns with the chemicals and just being thoughtful. So maybe that's why it's there. And we have a more thoughtful process now, and we have a more centralized look at what would be a better cleaning agent.
Yeah. Yes.
And we need to get it clearly communicated so that our principals, our teachers know that the the process or principals do, but to make sure those kinds of things get off those lists.
I would also say hand sanitizer would have been in that same group, or soaps may have been. There may have even been I can't, thinking back, it feels like so long ago before COVID, but I feel like there might have been hand sanitizer on those lists too, and it's the same issue. So
Yeah.
it's a good point, and we can look at that.
Yep. For sure.
I
So
want
we had
to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm just reflecting that Kim had a suggestion about creating a teen group at the high school just for enjoyment that would naturally help kids with social anxiety exacerbated by the pandemic, for fun, you know, something that's for fun and not coming along. It doesn't come with a requirement for a student to start it or work to be done. So, and as you all know, we do have a variety of clubs at the high school, but we are trying to give thought to ways to relieve anxiety and give kids some time to be together without creating more stress. We had some successful programs in the summer with the Adventure Club, and so that is something that we've had some suggestions for. Aaron, Beth, anyone have anything to add to that?
I was just going to add that, you know, anything captured both in the chat and verbally will be part of our record, you know, so sharing those ideas in chat is a way to add that suggestion to the list of things that are considered as we think about planning. So I just wanted to let people know that if you put it there in the chat or share it verbally, it will also be part of that gathered dialogue as part of the survey and other things.
Okay, well, we are coming up on 7:30. Did anyone have any other questions or comments to add to the dialogue tonight?
Heather asked the question, has there been conversation about providing a one-time payout to all staff members? That was one, and there's two other questions that came in just a moment ago as well.
It's certainly an idea that has been suggested. I know, I believe another district in our area did make that choice. So certainly something that can be given consideration.
It goes back to that comment we talked about with a supplanting, where it can't be used for base level salaries, but it can potentially be used for something like that. So certainly by putting it in the chat here, it's an idea that we'll add to the list as well.
That would likely not be the 7 million though. So we have to, because you would have to make that connection back to how that's serving our disadvantaged students. So
Kim has a great idea as well here. Is the after school learning lab does not directly teach, it's more of a study how our kids go to get help and support. Could we create after school math and science classes where it's more of a direct instruction, math support? Great ideas. You know, feel free to add that to the survey if you are able to fill it out as well in the open-ended or in the after school checkbox. But you know, you'll have an open-ended section on the survey as well where you can give specifics. So if after school isn't specific enough, it's a chance for you to share an idea like this. And again, by having it in the chat here, it'll be for our purposes, but those are the kinds of things that we're looking for parents to say, what will your child take advantage of if we were to offer? What would make the most sense for them?
so we do. Oh, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, Amy was just saying, yes, I appreciate that, that idea. She was just kind of doubling down on Kim's suggestion. And then there was another question from Mr. Mo. Just wrapping up renovation to Hillside. Are there plans for Meads Mills? That's one of the sites that has old infrastructure and could use an upgrade. I'll leave that one to Mike.
So it was not this past summer, the summer before, we did do some renovation inside of Meads Mill. I do know that with regards to HVAC specifically, that's probably one of those buildings that, you know, if we were to, you know, think about some longer term improvements, that was probably one building along with a few others that we would probably need to revisit the HVAC system and just to see what the design of those systems, to what level they've been designed to, and if they needed to be upgraded. So I think in that regard, I think certainly Meads Mill would probably be in the mix if we were to go forward with, another type of bond program down the road, some point down the road. So.
And then there was the last suggestion supported by Ms. Prescott as well. I'd love to see some support for these kids and the social loss they've endured, and going back a little bit more to that non-academic need. So appreciate those suggestions as well as we think about ways in which we can be creative to help meet those needs for kids in a non-academic way. That's the last I see in the chat.
Okay, well, we do have another session on Thursday from
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock. I don't have my notes. I don't want to say it wrong. 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And you can forward comments to the board's attention as well. And I should have put in here, if you have a question to be answered or suggestion of that nature, you can also send it directly to Northville Schools at NPS at Northville Schools. Oops, I forgot the .org. So, and then we will forward that question to the best person to answer it. Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing a part of your evening. Erin, were you going to add something?
I just added the link one more time, the stakeholder survey. We really want you to fill it out. If you have a child old enough to relate to the survey, middle school, high school, especially, we'd love for them to fill it out as well. Give us their feedback as a stakeholder in this process, or an elementary student that you could walk through it with and ask their opinion on. The link is there again. You got an email this afternoon around 5 o'clock from NPS as well with the survey in it. Please ask your neighbors and others to fill it out. The more feedback we get, the better.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and keep warm.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
So if you had not had a chance to complete the survey, we'd love for you to do so. And anyone in your household, including students, if you feel like they're old enough to understand the survey, or you want to sit down with them and work filling it out, spouses or other people in your home or multiple children, please feel free to have them fill it out as well. So I'll include that link, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Gallagher for any kind of closing remarks before we start taking questions and feedback from others.
Thanks, Erin. We will open it up for questions now. So we do have, let's see, let me take a look at chat. Erin put the survey link in chat. And so you can either unmic yourself or unmute yourself, excuse me, and ask the question or make a comment, or you can put it into chat as well.
I guess I'd like to make a comment. Hello, all. Good to see you again. Saw you on Tuesday at the board meeting. Thank you for everything that you've done. It's been trying times, obviously, here in Northville. I will say that I really do believe that Northville has done a great job with the academics over the last 2 years compared to a lot of the neighboring districts. So thank you all for your tireless efforts in that. I guess this is a lot, right? So it's kind of like a windfall. And so I guess, I would like to know what is the, I guess, pecking order as far as the administration is concerned, because I know that every year you have a wish list on what you want to spend money on. There's a lot that you could probably fill with this money. So one, I would like to, I guess, know what the wish list of the administration in the district is from your viewpoint. And then two, I think what I would like to see, I know that we've gone down this path of SEL, and I think it's very important for students overall and for long-term mental health. But I think that there's something that's been missed in all of this COVID. I think that there's an opportunity that's been missed regarding just overall physical health. And I don't know if there's a place for us to put in some sort of curriculum regarding diet, exercise, and really, you know, how overall health physically can help as far as, you know, getting us through COVID altogether. You know, I'm not going to go into statistics. Everybody has their own statistics they want to go to, but those are that have been healthy throughout COVID, you know, going into it as far as physically have seemed to have fared better than those that have not. And I think that it would be a good use of the funds to maybe come up with a curriculum regarding the diet, regarding the exercise and the benefits that that has as far as physical, and then that would also relate to the mental.
So with regards to your question about priorities, you know, there are a lot of priorities, and the thing about this funding that we have to be really careful about is that we have to think about it being one-time funding. So we don't want to create situations where we have legacy costs that we can't sustain over time, because when the money's gone, I don't know that any more is coming. So we do have some priorities with regards to certainly, as you referred to, kind of those SEL pieces as well as instructional pieces. You know, similar to what we talk about when we work with Northville Education Foundation, sometimes it's about identifying some of those one-time uses that really will help us get some traction in an area where we maybe have either kind of getting started or have really tried to get off the ground. So I think there are some of those issues, and I've heard some really good input even already from some of the surveys we've received and some PTA meetings, and even our first session on Monday night with some individuals who talked about even some kind of injections into our curriculum of pieces that are missing, some training potentially for our staff instructionally, and also to help our staff understand how to work with our kids who may be struggling mentally or emotionally. So I think there are some of those, as well as thinking about, is there ways to offset general fund expenses that we spend every year that might be able to help the district stay solvent for longer into the future, so that we continue to stay on the good financial footing. So I think those are our two priorities, is trying to find those holes. So I've had some folks who talked about some really interesting after school and summer programs that we might not normally be able to run because they cost so much to do so without us charging a fee to parents. And potentially even with some third-party providers who could provide some support and resources to kids. We've had some individuals who talked about, even after school, about having what we have now, which is kind of a support for what they're currently working on in class, but also some support for teaching them things maybe they either missed along the way or new material that would help to enrich the learning that they're getting during school. So I think there are some of those kinds of priorities that exist. And I think the piece that you shared at the end is a great one to add to our list, and certainly will be captured in this video recording. But if you haven't filled out the survey, it would be great for you to add as that kind of open-ended response at the end, so it's captured there as well in writing.
I did that. Thank you. And then what about, I guess, another question I have, and we've got to really hold on to the teachers that we do have. I know that there's continued shortage in you know, teachers and quality teachers, especially. Just like any profession, there's definitely bifurcation between those that are you know, better than others. And, you know, I don't know, I know for long-term salaries, you know, we can't do that, but even a potential small bonus to teachers, that just to show appreciation, it doesn't have to be much, right? So, and I know that we have, you know, a ton of teachers, parapros across the entire district, but I think that would be a nice gesture on the district's part as well, just to show the appreciation for those that we have, and just shows that we want to continue to keep those teachers.
And that is certainly an allowable expense, and has been previously. It falls under the category related to it was one of the broad categories, needed to, oh, here we go, other activities necessary to maintain the operation of the district and continue to employ existing staff. So those have been allowable expenses, and certainly appreciate that feedback, as to something I think that has been raised in a previous conversation regarding this funding as well.
Mike, would you just kind of review, if you could, I know if you've got that information at your fingertips, what has been done thus far? Because we did add some compensation last year under that category, and one of the outcomes of our financial audit and our fund balance formula that we have in our contracts is if our fund balance, our audited fund balance is above a certain percentage, that does result in a bonus for staff. And so that continued fiscal responsibility and stability that we've had over the past several years has resulted in that opportunity to pay that bonus. And that is for our teachers, and that's also in our other employee agreements as well. So Mike, do you want to just add any comments? It doesn't necessarily address moving forward, and it doesn't negate your input, Dan, about paying attention to keeping our quality staff. But anything to add to that, Mike?
No, I would just, just kind of echo what Erin had mentioned earlier, is that, yeah, it is a permissible use. Even pre-pandemic, we've had structured in our teacher agreement, and really all of our, now this year, all of our labor groups, some variation of a bonus based on our, financial conditions and our audited results. So unfortunately, that has actually been beneficial because we've been able to actually pay out those bonuses given, our financial situation really since they've been in play. So we're happy about that, and that's kind of what we hope to be able to continue to do. So.
And hats off to our employee groups too, because that adding that formula-based language has the upside if we maintain our fiscal stability. And then it also has the alternative if our enrollment projections or something catastrophic happens or the state funding doesn't come through. So that does cut both ways. So really appreciate the fact that folks step up to understanding some of the fiscal realities of school. So I think we're trying to pay careful attention to where we can we're always seeking fair compensation, competitive. That's certainly incredibly important in the market right now. But that sustainability piece is also something that we all, all benefit from paying attention to as well. Are there other questions or comments?
Yeah, hi guys. Sorry, my video is wigging out. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, as long as the audio is good. My name is Mandy Ordaz, and my son attends Cook. And so obviously my focus is on the special needs population. So my questions are, how are the funds being allocated, divided? How are they being divided between the schools? And we're new to Cook, relatively new to Northville District. But according to what I know and just what I heard, it seems to me like the most what was the term you guys used? The most underserved population in Northville District would be the special needs. Huge population at Cook, right? And many of them can't go back to school. There's like 30% of the kids who can't, because of their medical needs, go back to school now. They're homebound because there's no virtual option. And the burden that puts on the caregivers and the parents is immense, and it's totally not even seen, not even talked about, not even asked about. And so in my opinion, we need to get their feedback. So that's my second question. How are the funds allocated for schools divided? And then how are those special needs families being targeted to get their feedback? What do they need? Do the caregivers need counseling? Do they need respite care? Do the students need iPads at home? What do they need? How are you targeting the special needs population?
So in terms of the actual division of the money, that is part of this planning process. So there isn't a formula for that piece. So that's one thing. Absolutely, the legislation specifically in that 11T funding talks about those students most impacted by the pandemic, and vulnerable populations include our students with disabilities. So That is why we're reaching out and talking to parents and getting input. So if you have suggestions, we're pushing out the survey input and the information on all of our channels of communication. So if you have any additional suggestions for more specific reach outs, we certainly can do that. The whole issue of what's allowable under FAPE and delivery of special education services is another topic. And so that full virtual option under the guidelines that are available to us is also an issue of concern. So we heard feedback about families with regard to that virtual option. So that is a factor that we have to give consideration to, but under the allowable pieces, and we certainly have some, as you see and hear right now, significant funding to address some of those needs. So technology at home and creating better opportunities for access is certainly one of the items that's under consideration. Aaron, do you have anything to add to that, or Mike?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add, Mary Kay, is that in rolling this out, the Michigan Department of Education was very clear and adamant that we do not actually develop a plan and then come and bring it to the community. So we don't, in terms of really your initial question, is there an allocation? Absolutely not. We have not have actually started working on the plan, because that's really the intent of these informational sessions and the survey, to get your feedback. And it's only then, after we get that information and have that input, will we then start drafting the plan.
And I would add that one of our toughest things, and any way we get, as Mary Kay said, anything you can do to help us or give us suggestions on, is getting those individuals to make sure they fill out that survey. It's sent out in a lot of channels, but if there's another way, if there's a group somewhere that maybe those folks access that, and I don't always, get our emails, or because a lot of those individuals, or cooks specifically, are not necessarily they're from the county, but not necessarily from the district. If there's a way to communicate that survey, to get them to click on that link, or even just to send an email, I mean, it doesn't have to be in the survey to be feedback. If there's a way for us to capture that, and we've been visiting some PTA meetings and having some conversations there, but again, it's still a limited audience. And as you can see today, we've got 12 people here. On Monday night, we had, around 20. So any way we can get that to them to help get that feedback from them, we're happy to do that. So if you've got any ideas to help, besides our listservs and our emails and our Facebook posts and our district webpage, it's hard because it's only accessible if we can get to them and get them to click on that and put their concerns down in writing.
Perfect. That was my exact question. So the best way to get feedback from special needs parents is for them to fill out the survey, correct?
Yes, that is what we hope to get done, is to get them in writing, especially that open-ended section where they can put specific ideas. If they're, they can generalize in the part where they're going to talk about their priorities, but they can also provide specific examples like you did today of the things that make sense for them.
Fantastic. And how long is the survey open till?
It will be open until the 22nd, I believe.
Okay.
That's the date we set, right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I believe that was correct.
Yeah, I will send it out. Thank you so much for.
Yes, and please feel free to share the link in your Facebook groups, or if you have, some sort of mom-to-mom connection or anything like that, feel free to say, hey, don't forget to fill out this link to talk about how to spend this $7 million.
I definitely will. That's a great question. Thank you.
And then I see a hand from Kristen.
Yeah, and this is directly to that, Aaron. Since you, I don't know who prepared the slides. I just have to personally say, like, when I got the invitation, I was like, it sounds really kind of ominous, when you see the, the name of it. It's like, oh, we have funds to spend, but that's nothing really. I had no idea how much money we're even talking about and what it really would be allowed to be spent for. So like I saw the emails and I was just kind of curious. I was like, oh, there's money to spend. I'll be part of it. But I think for a lot of people, they just kind of read over it and it's like, oh, well, this is complicated. Just another meeting. I have no idea, and they just go on with their day. if there's a way perhaps for us to send it out or even put it on the website. I think I saw it like on a Facebook post, I think on the Northville, on the district page. If that slide that kind of says like the allowable funds, to kind of communicate that to people, it's like, hey, this is how much money we're talking about. I mean, if you really wanted to, have details, you can look at the slideshow, but in essence, this is how much money we have to allocate. This is what it's targeted for. And these are kind of the allowable areas. I think that gives people, at least me, it gives me a lot more of an idea of like where to think like, oh yeah, this is something that I would always wanted, this would be a great thing to kind of do. Like, for example, I would totally be into trying to detox some of the cleaning things that we use, like cleaning items, to still clean and disinfect, but use something that's, doesn't pollute the air basically, because our kids spend so much time in school. And, that would be an allowable thing. That's something that we still spend money on anyway, but it would probably have some upfront cost to change it. So I guess, if people had more of an idea, I guess that slideshow, that the slide that kind of showed what are the things that we could actually spend the money on, and then, send it out that way, and then include the survey, I think you might have a little bit more feedback.
Okay, appreciate that feedback. We have recorded Monday and today's sessions. We will post those recordings, and I know everyone won't access those either, but for those who may want to access it and hear this conversation where they can't interact live, but they can at least see the interaction and fast forward and rewind parts that they want to see again, we'll make those available as well.
Yeah,
Mary
that
Kay,
sounds good idea.
Mary Kay, I could just mention to Kirsten as well with regards to our chemicals that we use, just as a side comment. Actually, we really did spend some time kind of investigating what would be the safest product to put in our classrooms and use as a disinfectant. And the product that we use is from a manufacturer called Betco, and it's called a GE Fight Back. And any of the chemicals, if you go online, you can look at on our website, you can access MSDS. It's safety data sheets, and it kind of gives you a lot of good information about the individual products that we use. And this particular product that we use actually has an HMIS rating of 000. So it's probably the safest disinfectant that we could probably put in our buildings. So
Okay, I appreciate that.
I just wanted to pass that along.
Okay, and I totally appreciate that. The one thing I wanted to add to that is the one thing I think where you guys can't really control very much right now, what is actually being put in the classroom, is that, parents are asked to bring in disinfecting wipes, for example. And the way I find out what kind of stuff is being used is basically when my kids come in the car and I smell their, I can just smell it coming in. I'm like, what the heck just happened? What do you smell like? And they basically smell like Lysol wipes, walking into my car because they're being asked to, wipe down their desks with whatever parents provided. And Lysol wipes, quite honestly, I don't even use without, like gloves myself. So that was just something to add. I guess that's something that's kind of like heavy on my heart. It was like, I don't really want anybody to really use those things, without gloves. So I appreciate you saying that I guess the disinfectant that you're using is not really that harsh, but I think some of the other stuff that's out there that the kids do use on a daily basis and are exposed to is still something that would be good to address.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments that anyone has?
This is Kirsten one more time. Can I ask something about the teacher bonuses? That is something that I really do think that's really something really important, because I just see all those teachers that just work so tirelessly this entire time, and they still do. My kids were on like quarantine for 7 days this past week, and like our regular teacher, for one of my kids was out. She was on like some kind of a medical, some kind of leave, family leave, and so we had sub teachers and a sub of the sub, and so the other teachers from the other grades stepped up and like organized, so that my son could continue learning. And I really, it's not even their classroom, and I so appreciate all their work. if we can kind of put a real good handle on that, to make sure that they see that they're appreciated, that would be awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's great to hear. Are there any other questions? All right,
Just,
well,
sorry, one last real quick question. I'm looking at the survey now, and okay, so if my only connection to Northville is a student in Cook, they don't really put them in like elementary, middle, or high school. So I just put like whatever.
you're going to put
grade he
parent
would
and
be
then and you're going to put parent, as a stakeholder, and then you're going to be asking the second question, do you fit into any of these groups? And one of them is going to be
Oh, perfect. Okay.
student with disabilities. So you're going to
Yeah,
identify your secondary category there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And again, please feel free to share out this survey, all of you, with anyone that you know or any groups that you're connected with. The more feedback we get, the better plan we can write and the better useful money we can put together. I mean, we're going to use the money. There's a guarantee, but we want to make sure it's used in the way that the community feels is the best. And it sounds like there are some common themes both between Monday night and today, and we'll see if those continue to play out in the survey results as well.
And again, the survey is open to parents, to high school students, to our teachers, our staff, our support staff. It's also open to community agencies that serve any of our vulnerable populations as well. So certainly those perspectives are also important to us. So.
Erin, this is Carson one more time. I think I took a screenshot of your the slide that talked about, what kind of things it can be used for. Can I use that, I guess, when I post it like on Facebook or something, or do you want me to wait and kind of see if you guys post anything specifically there to use?
You are welcome to go ahead and post that, Kirsten.
Okay.
We will also do a link to this slide presentation and get that posted on our website. So it'll be a link. So we will add these informational presentations and we'll add the link to the slideshow or the slides. And then certainly the stakeholder survey is available through the 22nd, and we may not close it then. We certainly will take a look at what kind of feedback and what groups were represented. And if we need to push out to garner some more input, we can certainly do that.
Okay, cool. I did one slide. It just said I wasn't really sure if I just didn't see it because I'm looking at it on my phone. But when I saw the first breakout of the amount of money, I think I didn't realize, and I don't know that it was like listed anywhere that it was actually like in millions. Like at first I was looking at it and going, oh, $1,000 per student or something like that.
Oh yeah, the 000 right at the top. So
it's those accounting terms. They drop all those numbers when they do it. And it looks like thousands, and it's really millions.
Yeah. Exactly. That would be, I think for the average person, I think looking at that, I was like, okay, what are we talking about per, are we talking millions? Are we talking per student? Or that's a lot of money. So
we'll try to make sure we highlight the 000 at the top. So
thanks.
Well, thank you all for coming today and for sharing your feedback. Appreciate you filling out the survey if you're able. And obviously any other questions you may have, feel free to email any of us. We'll be happy to do so. Anything else? All right. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day. Look forward to hearing from you.